The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour government. A podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards the
most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour government. Made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts.
The slushy just wasted me.
Oh, it
fell on my face.
It's an avalanche of slushy, up your nose. I had that before.
Now imagine you're wearing a heavy vest.
Yeah.
How's it going so far?
You could
I'm going to
There's
put
a riot. Brian Tamaki is down the end of the...
on just so I can actually be hot.
Okay.
And be relieved by the slushy.
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to send them a little message to say be careful when you're tilting it at 90.
Tato, you've been listening to Mihingarangi Forbes struggling with slushy.
This is true. I was having an issue with pouring it, and I want to just reach out to those prison guards to say, be careful when you get it past 90 degrees. It's like an avalanche into your nose.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going with yours, Annabelle Lee?
I'm okay. Can I just start by saying pinch and a punch for the first of the month and no returns for the day?
Wow.
That takes me back.
Ben Thomas.
It's May Day as well. There'll just be workers rising up, pinching, punching the owners of capital everywhere.
Definitely the security at prisons will be rising up because they'll be asking why they can't have slushies and people from MB can have hair straighteners.
I actually bumped into a defence lawyer today who was visiting one of his clients a while back before this hit the news, and he said that a guard offered him a slushie.
Oh,
when
there
he
you go,
went.
sharing it around.
So,
really?
Yeah, this is a guy who defends hardened criminals.
Was it Golriz Garaman?
It's not. No, it was a lower profile barrister.
This is, by the way, the Spin-offs podcast supported by Flick, Gone By Lunchtime, and we're all drinking slushies here today in honour of the major political story of the week.
Cheers.
Oh, which is the revelation that corrections have spent a lot of money. How much, Ben? You know, facts.
$1.1 million almost
on a whole host
19
of slushy machines
but
to
can
keep
we
the
just
guards
clarify,
cool
is that
during.
just for the machines or does that also include the syrups?
And the sugar.
Because if it includes the syrups, that's actually value for money.
Also, the power. As someone who's...
What is it like?
We've got a slushy machine going in the office. We got one on Monday.
How much did you pay for yours?
The slushy machine, I think it was about $300 to rent. But the power on that thing, don't you think,
but
Tina?
you know
Hello
you
to Tina, who's in charge of running the...
Actually...
It's been chewing through the power, don't you think?
know, you can wire them up, though, and they can actually generate power. And
because there's a turbine inside.
A dynamo.
But you know, I think
put the district back into the national grid.
Yeah.
Well, our friends at Flick will be really pleased to hear this.
It's their thing.
This opens the door really to solar panels on prisons to be able to generate those slushy machines.
In order to
and
keep
also,
the
what are they
guards
drinking out of? Are they keep cups? Slushy
great point.
Good
Great point.
Slushy keep cup.
Maybe just sort of hovering underneath in a layback style and just
They've
pulling
got a
back.
chair, the old dental chair.
Yeah.
It's been because they'll be cheap as chips now. They'll probably pick them up in the white up a second-hand shop. Just wheel them in and lay back.
Is it a full service agreement? Is it like when you have a water cooler in the office and every month some guy comes around and just like dumps this giant sack of crushed ice and food colouring into the tank?
That's right.
The story of the slushies.
And, you know, in prisons, what colour?
Well, we've got a range. We've got a red
yellow.
one and a white one and a yellow one.
I mean, because you wouldn't be able to really do gang colours.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
You couldn't
So you
have the
didn't pick up
raspberry
on
or
that,
the
did you?
blueberry.
No, I didn't understand what you. I just thought
I mean,
you
you
were talking
couldn't
about
do
the lovely
strawberry,
range
raspberry.
of colours.
You
Traffic
definitely
lights,
couldn't do blueberry.
like in Common Co.
Couldn't do Coke.
Everyone
Coke.
just have the Pink Panther one because it's the best flavour anyway. A
Is
little
pink
bit of
okay?
cream.
The reason
I've
that the
actually seen
slushies
the
are in
green
the
gang.
news is
Seen the lime
because Simon Bridges drew attention to it over the weekend and got some headlines, and then it turned into a little bit of a, does this somehow encapsulate the threats to his leadership, which are hanging by a string a bit, and there have been various questions after of Judith Collins and Simon Bridges, who emerged grinning from caucus meeting yesterday, Tuesday. But since we have Annabelle Lee here, executive producer of The Hui, and Manhire Forbes, who is the host of The Hui, I wanted to ask you first, Annabelle, do you have, can you say you trust completely Manhire?
Completely.
Do you but will you actually say that? Are you willing to say the words, I trust Manhire Forbes?
I trust Manhire with my children and my life and my favourite shoes.
And Manhire, you'd able to say you have total confidence
I
in
want
Annabelle's
to-
leadership?
I want to have my children.
So you have an
6 days of the
do
week.
you have complete confidence
Complete
in
confidence.
Manhire's leadership of The Hui?
Confidence and trust.
Absolute trust.
I did leave an organisation kind of because of her. So
Okay, so that wasn't that hard,
So
right?
trusty.
But for
So-
Judith Collins and Simon Bridges, it was quite tricky to say those words.
So
Oh no,
this week.
totally. I even trust you.
What?
I trust you too.
You trust Judith?
No, you.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh,
There you
good.
go.
Oh, so you mean just can say it about anyone?
The next level out, I trust you. Yeah,
Oh, I
I'm
see.
good at trusting.
I think it's all very unfair.
Not sure
You
about
know,
Ben.
These people being, Judith Collins and Simon Bridges being confronted with these questions on their way into work by press gallery reporters. Look, as Simon Bridges said, this is the new National Party. This is a newer generation. They don't like to put labels on things. They don't like to be tied down to traditional definitions of loyalty and support. They have a modern relationship.
I wish though that we just
open
had
relationship.
It's the political gig economy.
I just wish though that we had like different ways of asking those questions so it's not the same thing every time. Do you trust so-and-so? Do you trust so-and-so? Like, can we like mix it up a bit, reporters? Can we say stuff like, Simon, would you give Judith the passcode to your cell phone?
Right.
Because, would you
No.
let Simon go through your emails?
Well,
Yeah.
and she did during the investigation into the
Forced.
Jamie Lee
Indeed.
Ross leak.
Pretty much forced. But
So-
I think that reporters need to be more innovative in their question lining and questions to those MPs and those particular trust issues.
That's sort
Just
of
like
specific
mix it up,
examples.
Mix it up.
turn it upside
Just
down.
general trust
back it around.
exercises,
Yeah.
right? Sort of try them actually
Oh, I
on
know
the
what-
caucus run.
The fall
You know,
back.
Got to fall backwards. We're going to invite Simon Bridges to fall backwards, and Judith is there. Will she catch you?
No,
Yeah.
what they
When
do
you
is they get two, like maybe Judith and say Nikki Kay, and Simon has to run to the caucus door, and they've got to trust that they're not going to close the door.
Well, look,
see how
it's
that
just some
goes.
ideas. We're available for further consultation on this at any time.
I think the slushy. I think the slushy's making me a bit silly because of the sugar.
Because the sugar,
The sugar,
it's the
it's the
sugar.
high
It's
sugar.
the sugar in there that's making everyone slur their speech.
Maybe National should have attended the Heartworks Treasury workshop.
Oh, that.
The kind of positive vibes, Cards Against Humanity card game that our most powerful central agency is now using to manage its analysts' feelings and relationship
Really?
skills. Yeah, I think TV3 reported on it. Sun feelings, moon feelings.
What are your feelings at the moment, Ben?
My
Sun,
my
moon?
feelings are that something has gone deeply wrong within Treasury. The advertisement for this event was talking about, imagining a society so compassionate that it will rewire our national consciousness. I mean, somebody's consciousness has been rewired at Treasury. There's been, it reminds me of, one of those sort of 60s kind of communes, which all end in mass murder after a sort of summer of love.
I've seen some T-shirts around lately saying "Be kind." I wonder if it's got something to do with the whole kindness thing.
It's definitely part of that whole well-being industry, isn't it? Which is, although I think there's probably a lot of good attached to it, there are a lot of people as well who see an opportunity to cash in And
the hard work card game, $113 plus GST.
On topic.
Sorry.
Grant Robertson has kind of distanced himself from it, so did the Prime Minister, I think. But it is the wellbeing budget, isn't it, Ben, at the end of this month of May?
It is the wellbeing budget.
And does the government stand open to criticism in terms of that being woolly as an idea when it has sort of circular card games being played in the Treasury building?
We don't know yet. I imagine it will be a traditional budget with a few more metrics attached to it. This wellbeing dashboard that Treasury have up on their website that talks about how it's better to spend money on people not being lonely than people not having rheumatic fever, I think, or is it diabetes?
Got to start somewhere though in budget, don't you?
It's all a big first year political philosophy nerd fest. Sort of utilitarianism. Everyone's calculating how many utils something is worth, and it all seems a bit. It seems a bit silly in the kind of preamble, but it will just be a normal budget with this kind of rhetoric attached and with a few more things that are being measured. The government's got some issues, that it needs to address.
I'd like to see if it actually works, eventuates. So like you said, there's a matrix. You've got to hit. You've got to proposals to the minister, and in there you've got to say it's going to be environmentally friendly. It's going to work for Māori and these areas and. What examples did you say? Some other things.
This will be
the litmus test for them, because Annabelle and I were talking about this on the way in, and we were saying, whānau order basically ticks all of those boxes. So will we see if this government is actually going to say, yes, actually, you've got 3 ticks out of 5 there, so you're going to get funding, as opposed to something that's not ticking the boxes. Well, let's just wait and see.
All of this stuff originates, from the idea that GDP is a poor measure of how well a country is doing, that we can't just measure things on how much stuff is made, bought and sold. That's a reasonable assumption. And people used to point to Bhutan, which adopted gross national happiness as its measure. They would say, well, why can't we be more like Bhutan? And Bhutan has the largest group of stateless people that it keeps living in refugee camps without any rights or citizenship. So, you do have to do more than just put measures in place. It can't just be a PR exercise. It's no good if we're publicising well-being, but, people are still suffering.
In terms of its responsibility, the government and successive governments to Māori, they wouldn't have had to put in the wellbeing budget had they have kept the closing the gaps and policies like that, because that's the wellbeing budget is kind of to scoop up all of those Māori that aren't doing well and others as well.
And it's designed to look on a longer trajectory, isn't it? So that some of those programs, which something like Whanaora, which is not designed necessarily to have an impact within a 12-month cycle, but a 12-year cycle or something. That's part of the thing behind it.
Will they get any more money, Whanaora?
I haven't actually seen the budget.
No one has, but there's been promises.
Yeah, there's been a lot of promises.
Well, there is a big challenge now, and we'll come to it in a bit, but given that this is the year of delivery and it's a transformative government, and we've just seen the defenestration of the great capital gains tax pledge, which it kind of was. I think it's fair to say it was a pledge, certainly a determination on the part of the Prime Minister to introduce it, which has now been completely thrown out. This budget takes on even more importance, doesn't it, in terms of being the year of delivery, whether it's on housing or mental health or just generally the underprivileged parts of New Zealand?
I think, capital gains tax, I think people were looking at it as probably the most effective tool to try and introduce some equality across the board, and now that's been pulled off the table. They're going to have to pull some tricks out of their hat to be able to do that. And, seeing what happened with capital gains tax reminded me not so much of John Key and the superannuation, but a lot of what happened with closing the gaps. And I guess, that is MMP. She needed Winston to get on board, and he wouldn't. I wonder about, what she was actually given by the tax working group. Did it go too far in terms of saying that businesses should be included and that sort of thing? Did they make it too difficult, too distasteful? I don't know, but certainly on my Twitter feed, which of course is the font of all knowledge, there was a lot of disappointment, particularly from young Māori.
Young people, full stop, really.
Yeah.
It's an interesting example of really the base genuinely crossed for the first time under this government, and the greater gain. You can see the political advantage in it. Absolutely, even notwithstanding the Winston element, there's obviously the political advantage in that it spikes the guns of the main oppositional argument, which is, tax under and all that stuff, but they were already gearing up. I mean, the election isn't that far away, right? A year from now we'll be in full election mode, and that was going to be a central part of it, wasn't it?
It's the worst thing that could have happened to National, and particularly to Simon Bridges, was that getting pulled off the table. It's great for Labour. I'm interested to know, Ben, do you think if Labour got a clear majority next time, or Labour and the Greens, do you think it would be reintroduced, or is it dead in the water forever?
The Prime Minister has promised that under her there won't be a capital gains tax, and that she won't campaign on it, she won't introduce it, and it won't be policy. So,
although according to Kate Hawkesby, she's going to be headhunted by the UN, by somebody in the UN that hires people to
she's halfway out the door.
And so she's gone. So maybe she won't be there. Maybe that's what's going on.
I suspect that's quite unlikely, but that does raise the spectre of, say, if she decided to hand off the Prime Ministership, to Grant Robertson in the same way that John Key effectively did to Bill English, could that position change? Well, we did see Bill English soften on the super stuff in terms of, where Key had been, which was no changes ever. Bill said, we'll have some changes over a longer period of time. So you could have, you could see it in those circumstances, but not while Jacinda Ardern is the Prime Minister.
It's a curious thing, though, because, this is a person who a year and a half ago was making captain's calls about, bringing it in come hell or high water, and now she's saying that she will never, ever, ever do it, even if everything changes, so...
That was as much of an interesting part, wasn't it? And that's why I think, in a way, that the John Key superannuation analogy was drawn, is that there's basically a decision has been taken to just completely extract all the sting of that and just go, all right, that's off the table completely, let's not talk about it anymore. And
could she have kept it on the table? Could she have kept it on the table and then just, people I was talking to were saying, keep it on the table, keep it live. She didn't have to throw it out.
No, she could have. And if there was, because remember, of course, the political party that's the most cross about this are the Greens, and on current polling, a Labour Green government would just get across the line. Sorry about that drilling, folks.
Yes.
It's a rival podcast.
It's just the dentist.
It's the dentist underneath trying to drill up to get some slushies.
Should we pause, Tina? Or yeah, we're just going to pause. We apologise for that interruption to normal service. We were speaking when interrupted by that drilling from a local dentist or rival podcast. We were talking. What were we talking about? We were talking about
politics.
Politics. I think we
capital
were
gains.
Talking about how the Greens would be cross about capital gains tax thing particularly, and of course it would be possible for Jacinda Ardern to say, if you give us a mandate, then we will in the next election pursue
or if she
it.
passes,
But she
goes to the UN and passes over to Grant Robertson.
Lance the boil. Yes.
Yeah, which I think is maybe what they were worried about, the idea that,
the
National
podcast will be discussing that very possibility.
That National would still be able to say, look, you escaped a capital gains tax this time, but you'll be getting one next time if Labour are elected. And so that would still be what they would be talking about during the election, the same way as they were, in the last election. What counts as the family home? What about lifestyle block owners? Et cetera, et cetera. Which I think one problem, it's been brought up by a few people, is that the government one, didn't make a case for a capital gains tax. They really left it to Michael Cullen to just sort of wander the desert, the prophet kind of, the prophet madman, sort of spreading the gospel.
Tax God.
And I have a suspicion that they maybe weren't prepared for an in-depth policy debate. It didn't strike me that the Prime Minister felt particularly comfortable talking about, the potential effects on business. Sometimes I think that, the senior ministers in this government do have a pretty narrow understanding of policy and of government, but most of them do come from their interests are in those social services portfolios. They're not really economically minded.
It's very diplomatic of you, Ben. Keep going.
Well, no, I mean, if you just look at where they were in opposition, Grant Robertson, before he was finance spokesperson, very much in those social roles, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister, very much in those social roles. In terms of sort of policy heft, kind of economic nous, I guess you'd say, it's really those guys like David Parker who don't have a huge public profile, who are not as accomplished as communicators and not as sort of, prominent with the public.
I mean, isn't there a sense as well, though, just in terms of the, I guess, cost-benefit analysis of spending the time that it would be required to win that battle and what would happen in the meantime? Actually, they'd whittled down the capital gains tax so far by ruling out the family home, by doing all these different things that meant that the actual, what you'd be bringing in the foreseeable future, certainly, it was so minimal that what was it all for? But symbolically, it's much more than that, because it's meant to be a generational change, it's meant to be transformative, and, to repeat what we've heard time and time again, there have just been an entire, whatever you want to call it, generational class who have just absolutely milked it, making money out of property.
I hate those guys. Anyway, keep going.
But it's true, right? And so the message it sends to people, under the age of 300 or 400 who have not been able to just purchase property, buy another one and laugh, is actually maybe this is not what we were promised after. And I would say that it means that the expectation now is what is next. And I think it puts a lot more onus on the government to follow through on the proclaimed nuclear moment of the generation, so there's talk that the Carbon Act is coming soon, and there may have been a deal reached on that. But if the Prime Minister can't really do something bold on that front, then I think the year of delivery is going to be looking pretty shabby.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, there's been a lot of talk that mental health will be a big focus in the budget in terms of more funding, and this is because Labour campaigned really heavily on this. There was a lot of sort of weeping on the steps of Parliament talking about youth suicide, and in the year and a half that they've been in government, they've done actually less than nothing. They have cut, I think, 17 programs or pilots in the mental health area, including, sending mental health workers out with police on call-outs, which then ended up being a recommendation from their much vaunted sort of mental health inquiry anyway. And
isn't the review not out yet?
The review came out end of last year, December.
Yeah, so there was something just recently about what they've missed out a chunk of it.
Jess McKellen wrote a story in Stuff yesterday saying that, underneath that single report, there were reports in sort of subcategories that sort of summarised all of the evidence and were meant to be a bit more exhaustive.
Report.
And the Māori issues report was... the draft was written by the people who were commissioned to do it, and then it was sent in for sort of peer review, and suddenly it emerged about half of the length with everything was changed, and there haven't been any satisfactory answers as to why it was changed. And some of the changes to the text basically sort of mollified kind of criticism that the draft report had made of the inquiry and its process. So, those sorts of things, and, we know that about the Māori issues report. We don't know what happened with all of the other sub-reports. So there is a question about whether the evidence, that the inquiry heard the evidence in the same way that other people who were present there heard it. And, is it a reliable document to actually start spending up big on?
It's going to be really difficult for those Māori MPs who have those seats, if their people aren't satisfied in those communities with the outcomes or the recommendations from the mental health or the state abuse and the energy review and all those kinds of things, where we've heard promises from politicians, particularly in those regions where Māori are, really struggling in terms of housing and those kinds of things. So come, what is it? How many months away is it? The next election. I think we forget that Labour has the 7 seats and they have to show what they've done for them.
I hope those, all those advisors and stuff aren't thinking that because there's no sort of Māori parties anymore, viable Māori parties, that they can just fuck Māori around this term and get away with it.
I think it's the sugar.
Not a sugar.
It's the sugar.
On the Māori seats.
Because they think they can just cruise back in next time.
Just as a sidebar to that, it's interesting that there's suggestion that there, which is the National MP who's keen to, the List MP,
Joanne Hayes.
Joanne Hayes is keen, and it'd be an interesting development, wouldn't it, if National decided to go again for the Māori seats, because in one way it would be quite a strong statement of moving past the kind of Don Brash era.
Have you seen where National gets in terms of party votes in the Māori seats?
Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah,
I mean,
New Zealand First beats them.
So symbolically, though, you could say, well, then you have a National Party with a Māori leader, a Māori deputy leader, and that is drawing a line under a whole sort of generation of thinking. Their policy is still to scrap the Māori seats, I think, strictly speaking. I don't think they've actually officially changed that. Just curious to know what you think, but it would also, even though it's tiny support, it wouldn't be very good for the rebuilding of the Māori Party, potentially, who at least would sweep out a few of those.
I think any party wanting to contest the Māori seats is a great thing for the Māori seats. The more the merrier, and it should be a contest in those seats. It shouldn't be any one party cakewalking them. So if National do decide to stand, then I think that's a great thing. Whether it has any actual impact. No, I don't think it will. But plus, I just don't see it happening, Toby. They can't be saying they're going to disestablish them on one hand and then have Joanne running somewhere.
But I mean, the Māori Party's still there, bubbling away and doing their thing. I'm not sure, how strong they are in terms of contending the next election and all those seats. But what I will say about Māori is that they are very political people, and if promises are broken or not met, people are talking all the time. Māori are talking all the time about who they need to, to represent them. There's big organisations now, iwi have got $50 billion of asset base and things like that, and so it'll be interesting if we don't see whānau ora get some more money, if we don't see the Māori vote get more money, I think that it will be very different for those Māori MPs and this current government in terms of the feedback that they get from Māori voters.
Next election would be a great election to have a new Māori movement start, because with the cannabis referendum, I'm predicting that there should be a much higher Māori turnout than usual, and younger. So if there was a Māori movement to begin, next election would be a good time.
That's the
to
lefty
kick it
lost
off.
City of gold. The cannabis referendum, this idea that the missing million will sort of stream out of sewers and manholes. It'll be like us, everyone will emerge from the underground and stuff,
and voters,
cast their ballots.
And Māori voters that voted for the Māori Party aren't too far off Māori voters who vote for the Green Party. They're similar people. It just depends what's being promised.
Let's talk briefly about the bullying review that's happening underway.
Annabelle bullies me all the time.
Well, okay. Well, let's talk about that for a little while.
The start date for that review.
Would you like to revisit your suggestion?
Actually, Annabelle doesn't bully me, but I have been bullied, and it's not good.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not. It's very, very not good. You've worked in Parliament before, Ben, and it's a very
I worked in Parliament
high-stress
until the 8th
place.
of October 2014, which is the start date for the review into bullying. So I'm in the
literally true.
Yeah, it was the beginning of the third term of the national government. So I'm in the clear.
Lucky you.
No one has any recourse.
No.
I got away with everything.
Plus, they didn't have Twitter back then.
That's the end of my thoughts on the bullying review.
I mean, we have...
Do what you will, Trevor.
We've all heard stories about MPs behaving badly. None that we can talk about on this podcast because we'll all get sued for defamation. But I don't think you need to work in Parliament to know that there is a toxic culture there. But I thought Andrea Vance's article was interesting because I didn't realise how far it stretched. I thought it was sort of ministers and MPs treating their staff poorly. I didn't realise that it was also actually within parliamentary services as well.
In the office of the clerk, there's a lot of, and Andrea Vance's piece, which is in the Star Times, like maybe a fortnight ago, a week and a half ago.
There was one a week and a half ago, and there was one this Sunday, a follow-up, yeah.
The staff, spoken to by staff, described what they felt was a, quote, 100% toxic workplace, quote, petulant and unprofessional behaviour from senior staff and gender intimidation. 12 men and 23 women have left over the course of that period that was being inquired. I mean, it does sound particularly bad.
The thing about workplace bullying too is that you really only need one bad apple and you can completely change the culture of an organisation. And it's like staff start to develop battered wife syndrome where people become accepting of the bullying and the abuse and the behaviour, and nobody wants to speak out for fear of attracting it towards them. So,
and there's no other place like Parliament there because it's got so many. It's a place where literally a kind of someone dressed up as Black Rod bangs a stick against the door of Parliament, has all these trappings, all these strange things. Whereas if you work in retail or podcasting, then you might go and work in a different one, and you could actually have a way of measuring how it works.
Often being seen
power, privilege.
Being seen as a bully in Parliament is often seen as a strength. If you can get into the debating chamber and really throw down and be hideous, then people. It's actually something that's revered there rather than...
It's reported on the 6 o'clock news.
So it's a strange place. Where's the National Review at, Ben?
Where is the National Review at? So Simon Bridges, I think, asked for the National Party to do an internal review of its culture in the wake of the allegations about Jamie Lee Ross, which I'm sure he'll cover in his new podcast. Unfiltered.
Jamie Lee Ross's new podcast.
Yeah. His mental health journey podcast.
We've been invited.
I assume that Jamie Lee Ross will go into detail about the allegations that he bullied and harassed staff.
He won't have guests, he'll just play tapes.
That's right, special guests who will only discover their special guests
social media covered.
And and because of these allegations, there were, in particular, allegations that Jamie Lee Ross and his associates had been harassing a local board candidate in Auckland. There was a review into, whether the National Party is doing enough to keep women safe, essentially, in the party. And the reporters, we understand, finished, but nobody knows where it is. They apparently didn't talk to any women MPs. It's not clear who they talked to.
Simon says he hasn't even read it.
Simon hasn't read it. He says they'll release it when the parliamentary review into bullying is released, even though he said that it's nothing to do with Parliament and none of the MPs
Did he say he would release it?
Well, he said it would be released at the time that the parliamentary review came out, because he said that timing was appropriate, even though apparently it has nothing to do with Parliament because no women MPs were spoken to, even though MPs like Joe Hayes have been quite outspoken about sexism around Parliament. So, who knows what actually happened? Apparently, some health and safety expert conducted the review, so maybe it was just a review of policies. They looked at the National Party's policies about harassment and were like, yeah, it's fine.
There's nothing here that says good harassment is good.
Yeah.
Nothing here that encourages bullying.
Yeah, so, it's a strange one. There's I think there's a lot of unhappiness in the National Party, outside Parliament itself right now, and maybe this is, how some of that is being expressed.
It's been a bit of bullying around. Certain bishops been saying things.
Yes.
Yes, so we're talking about that today.
We can, if you like. That could link us right back up to the Slushies.
Yes.
Brian Tamaki, who, in a sort of almost, it's an easy comparison to make, but it is a very Trump-esque tweet in terms of its phrasing and weirdness. He said that if he didn't get support for the Man Up program, which Destiny's Church runs in New Zealand prisons, that they might incite riots. Were those
riots
the words?
In every
and make riots
internally in each prison around the country,
which is pretty. And then when questioned on that on RNZ, he said, "Oh no, that was just to get you guys to pay attention." And then he was offered the opportunity to withdraw that threat, and he said no. And then there was what came next. The next day there was
political gang rape.
They were being gang raped.
Yes.
I don't know. What do we do with Bishop Tamaki?
I think Matthew Tukaki from the Māori Council probably hit the nail on the head when he said, if your program is good, then put it through the processes that are needed so we can see it for ourselves, and then we can throw money at it. But until you do that, we can't evaluate a program that we don't know anything about. They call it an Indigenous. I read on a tweet that basically the allegation was that the government was denying Māori an Indigenous tool or program. There doesn't appear to be anything Indigenous about the Man Up program to me. It's
a fantastic idea, having an Indigenous program that helps Indigenous people in prison to come to terms with issues around masculinity and domestic violence. But so far, what has at least come to public attention isn't very encouraging, such as one participant, one trainer, one tutor on it, posting online that the problem was the victims of domestic violence. Do you remember that? It was about 6 months ago. It clearly...
Yeah, I think it's, for Māori that are in prisons doing really amazing Indigenous programs with, prisoners at the moment, learning reo and learning about tikanga and where they're from. I think about the work of Henimore Elder, where she's working with... youth justice and just reconnecting them with their marae and things like that. Those are the most powerful Indigenous programs that you can get. But these people have been working for a long time, working out how to do this.
And plus, Destiny Church are going a bit troppo. They've started, recently they had protests outside the Alamo Mosque in Christchurch. They really are kind of going that Westboro Baptist route of just being kind of pointless provocateurs. Obviously, maybe they're going to have another, run at a political party in 2020.
Quite possibly.
Certainly, they are succeeding. If the goal is simply publicity, then it's succeeding.
If their goal is to make people mad,
let's before we say farewell, just touch briefly on Jacinda Ardern's flying visit to Paris, which is happening in, I think, just under a fortnight, where she will, with President of France, Emmanuel Macron, release the Christchurch Call, which is in order to address extremism and violence in social media and try and get a whole lot of nation states and corporates to agree on strategies to stop it happening. Is this something that is a big deal, or is it a risk of being just a very kind of flaccid, well-intentioned piece of paper?
I think it's important because, those social media platforms are really places where people with those sorts of views flock and feel like their views are normalised and their behaviours are normalised. I have to say, though, I'm really frustrated as well because there's actually some quite simple issues, very achievable, that Jacinda could be addressing right here, and that is that the Parliamentary Services website hosts, frankly, what are racist, ugly petitions that are published online all the time. And I recently complained about one which was calling for an end to the preferential treatment of Māori. It was filled with absolute nonsense, and I thought, was provoking resentment and hatred towards Māori. That was completely ridiculous because, unless you want to be the most imprisoned and the most unemployed and the sickest and all of that, there really is no Māori privilege. And I contacted Parliamentary Services through their Twitter page, of course, and they absolutely stand by it and talk about how, it's their job to host those things, and as long as they're respectfully racist and they don't swear, then it's totally fine. So when Parliament is prepared to host what is essentially not necessarily a form of hate speech but super offensive material like that, then why would Facebook do any different? Why would we expect Facebook to make any changes? Why do we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on taxpayer monies on campaigns like Give Nothing to Racism when Parliament hosts racist petitions? It's ridiculous.
It doesn't sound altogether
and homophobic
different
ones, which Joanne Hayes recently received, didn't she? So
yeah, but I think MPs have to receive petitions. People have to have the right to go to their elected representatives and petition them for whatever crazy harebrained, stuff they want. And it happens all the time, and most of these petitions go straight in the bin. But you can't. I don't think we should ever get to a space where the people's representatives, MPs, are saying, I don't like your views, I'm not even going to receive your bit of paper. I think New Zealanders always need that right.
It's not an absolute right that people get to express views like that.
Well, it goes as well to Andrew Little has announced that they're going to be expediting looking into hate speech laws, and it is a hell of a difficult thing to kind of try and reconcile those two conflicting ambitions, one of which is to stop the kind of blowing on the embers of hatred, which lead to, in their worst example, to what we saw in Christchurch, and also trying to protect free speech, which whether or not you want to join the free speech coalition is still a value that most of us feel is an important part of democracy. It's a hell of a difficult one to square, right?
Yeah, I'm frustrated by the attitude that freedom of speech is an absolute right and people carry on about it like Americans carry on about the right to bear arms. Actually, stop being ridiculous. You don't get to be a straight up fuckwit because you think you have an absolute right to.
I kind of think, at the core of all of this is if we had a nation that knew more about its past and accepted, where you came from, Toby, and you knew where I came from, and all the water under the bridge that went, through the New Zealand wars, and all the legislation that was taken, the loss of land and all those kinds of things, and then the consequences to it, we would be in a better place to be able to accept free speech because we'd be in a place of understanding. But this is kind of in a vacuum of misinformation, all these things that happen. We had a Prime Minister who went to Waitangi in 2018 and talked about the two houses being too far apart. And I think that the problem for this government is that they might do more karakia and do a few more mihi at Parliament and feel like things are getting better, but actually out there on the streets, it's still a rough place to be. If you identify as Māori, it's a hard place. It's hard to identify as Māori in this day and age because you just get shot down in social media. Probably needs to be looked at because that's a really easy place for people with no names and no faces to take you out.
Thanks, Mihi. That's probably a good note to leave you on. Thanks for coming to join us today. That's very cool.
My sugar rush. I've had the sugar rush and now I'm down.
She's crashing.
There's a lot more. There is a lot more Slushy out there in the office.
Just to get you back to the office.
A lot more. In fact, if anyone is in Morningside, please come and finish the stuff. We've got to give it back this afternoon.
Plant some trees though for the energy.
Thank you very much, Annabelle Lee Mayfair. Thank you, Mihingarangi Forbes. Thank you, Ben Thomas. Thank you, Tina Tiller. I'm Toby Manhire. Thank you, Flick. Go and look on any politics page and you can click through and get a sweet deal on your electricity. We'll be back soon. Next episode is our 50th Gone By Lunchtime.
Wow.
We're going to have slushies.
Talofa Lover. I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spinoff. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spinoff member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora, I'm Alex Casey, Senior Writer at The Spinoff. We wouldn't exist without the ongoing support of our generous members. If you're able to, you can make a donation at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spinoff Podcast Network.